Well, we're all creative. No, really, we are. It's something we do out of necessity as we navigate a world where the problems we face don't always match up with the resources we have available. For example, if you were to take the 5-gallon bucket, it doesn't come with any user manual, nor does it come with a warning label or anything like that. But, by design, we kind of assume that you're supposed to put stuff in it, and then, it's got a handle, so we're going to carry it around and stuff like that. But imagine yourself in your garage. If you don't have a garage, imagine yourself in someone else's garage. And you're sitting there and you've got some camping gear on a high shelf that's right out of reach that you want to get. And you look across the room and you see a bucket sitting there. You might think to yourself, you know what? I could take that bucket, I could flip it upside down, I could stand on it, even though it's not a ladder, and you could get that tin off that shelf. And if you were to do that, in a little bitty way, you'd be creative. Not big C, change the world type stuff, but little bitty incremental, get through the day type thing. And believe it or not, there's even a name for what you just did. It's called user innovation. User innovation is when you as a user have modified the function of something to suit your needs. Yeah. So, when I go to parties and social events and stuff like that, and you get bored or you run out of stuff to talk about, my go-to subject is creativity because that's my thing, And when I bring it up, most people are usually pretty receptive to the whole idea. And they like talking about it because it's current, it's fun, whatever. But more often than not, I get a different type of reaction. One that's more about confusion, intimidation, and stuff like that. And since I'm an art guy, and everybody associates creativity with art, they'll say something like, I can't even draw a stick figure. And honestly, I've seen their work, and they can't, But that's okay, because art and creativity are totally different things. Art's more about the expression of a concept. And creativity, really, that's more about solving problems in novel ways. So basically, the question I have for you right now is, how are you doing this already? How are you already a user innovator? Think duct tape. Yeah. How about home repair? We've all screwed up something there. Or here's something crazy. You ever gone on to Pinterest, download a recipe, and once you get it, change a few of the ingredients? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah. So sometimes user innovations can actually become a little bit more than just something fun like that. This is the Binky Bungee right here. It's made by a mom. And you can only imagine the mom that created this in the situation that she was in. And that basically, she was probably in a public bathroom or something like this. And when she was in there, her baby probably dropped a pacifier on the floor or something. It was disgusting. And she decided that, essentially, I don't want that to happen anymore. So she took one end of the elastic band and put it around the pacifier, took the other end of the elastic band and tied it to a spring clip. And clipped that to a onesie, so basically the pacifier couldn't fall out on the ground anymore. And so we run into these things all the time. So here's a few examples for you right off the bat. What about the mountain bike? The mountain bike was this invention that happened back in the 70s in California. And in California, they were racing these old touring bikes down these mountains. The touring bikes they were using, those old 10-speeds, with the curly handlebars, those things. Well, they're not made for this, so when they come down the hill, they'd wipe out and they'd crash and the bikes would break. What would happen is they would modify the bikes each time to make them better, to make them more suited for that situation. And after a few years, they kind of looked at the original bike and they looked at the bike they had, and they said, that's a mountain bike, that's not a touring bike. Also, sports bra. First sports bra, ironically, was 2 jock straps sewn together. Yeah. And then Gatorade. Gatorade was the University of Florida. Their football team was running out of gas in the second half, and they needed some kind of magic elixir to keep them going. And then Twitter. Twitter basically is Jack Dorsey's lifelong incremental advancement to figure out what other people were doing when he wasn't around. Yeah, that's really it, yeah. And it's doing pretty well. So again, you have to think about what drives us to be innovative. And it's necessity. It's, when we get in a bind, when the problems we face don't match up with the resources we have available. Now, there's another type of innovation that spurs from this. It's called manufacturer innovation. Manufacturer innovation makes a different type of product. Something like this. A wicked cool razor blade with like a grippy handle, like 9 blades on it. Rollerball mechanism in the middle. I don't even know what the hell it does. But it's super cool, and I want to buy it. Right? So the distinction between these two things is that user innovation is when the producer intends to benefit from using it. Manufacturer innovation, on the other hand, is when the producer intends to benefit from selling it. So there's two different types of motives there. Now there's another type of innovator that's a little more extreme. It's called a lead user innovator. And this is a term coined by Eric von Hippel up at MIT. He's at MIT, so he's got to be smart, right? Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. And he says there's this group of people who are innovating on what he calls a fuzzy front end of innovation. Okay, they're so far out there that they're ahead of everybody else. And if you were to look at a product life cycle curve, on one end you have basically when something started, and on the other end you have the future, low, nobody's using it, high, a lot of people are using it. And you can see lead users are out there before anybody really has identified any need for what is happening here. Now, as you might suspect, these people can be like highly educated, well-funded, techie people at big corporations like SpaceX, NASA, stuff like that. But you don't have to be extreme. You don't have to be techie to be extreme. I don't know if you remember this trend from a few years back. They used to take these backhoes and park them in ponds. Remember that? Yeah. They'd spin them around and they'd go skiing. Yeah. That's extreme. And that's definitely ahead of the market. Yeah. Now, so if you're having a tough time like envisioning someone in your daily life who's a lead user, let me help you out a little bit. Someone you bump into probably every day. Nurses. Nurses get put into situations all the times where the problems they face don't match up with the resources they have available. And they deal with a lot of techie stuff too. But there's something different about a nurse. Basically, when they're working, lives are on the line. That's a big difference. Yeah. So take, for example, Maggie McLaughlin up at Tufts Medical Center. Maggie McLaughlin got frustrated because IVs evidently aren't made for babies. And basically, the ones she was working with weren't lying flat on the baby's skin, however that works. It was getting knocked out or bumped out or something like that. It just wasn't effective. That drove her nuts until she created something new. It's called IV safety. It's a better product. It's safer. It just works better. And you know what? She's changing people's lives. So the question I have for you right now is basically the same question I had for you at the beginning. So take a moment, if you don't mind, and reflect on yesterday, maybe last week, last year. To think on the moments when you already are doing this stuff. When you're a user innovator already. And to draw inspiration from yourself. Yeah, yourself. To be more engaged, to be more intentional about creativity, to push it. And maybe you could be a lead user. And maybe you could be the person changing people's lives. Thank you. Thank you.